So we will start off with what is a man and what are his duties. تفضل.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a very important topic in the modern age. We've kind of discussed this already. Why? Because of ideologies, because of the confusion relating to this. They refer to it as the masculinity crisis. And the Sheikh spoke yesterday at great length, with great precision, using some of the evidences from the Quran and from the Sunnah about some of the verses that relate to manhood in the Quran. And there was some interesting points that he mentioned, for instance, that the word man is mentioned 57 times in the Quran, and some of them with the meaning related to manhood or masculinity or anything like that. At the end, the tail end of his discussion, which is where I want to kind of develop this, the Sheikh mentioned some of the virtues that he could extrapolate from the verses of the Quran. And this is where we want to start, because we all know that a man is a male of adult age. That's what a man is. But then there are these virtues that a man has that makes him more of a man, if that makes sense. And of course, this meaning a man here is not the biological meaning, but the virtuous meaning. So what are these virtues and what are the most important of them? The first of those, and the most important in my view, is courage. And this is based on the prophetic hadith of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam when he said that شَرُّ مَا فِي الرَّجُلِ, the worst thing in a man is, and then he said that two things. He said, بُخْلٌ هَالَةٌ, someone who is extremely stingy. وَجُبْنٌ خَالِعٌ, someone who is very cowardly. These are two things. With that, we see the opposite indicates to us what the best things or the most important things for a man to exhibit are. The first thing is, obviously, the opposite of cowardice is bravery. So for a man to be a real man, he needs to be brave. And this is the stereotypical meaning. Like if you say man up, it means be brave. That's effectively in the vernacular and the slang, how we use the term. And effectively, that is what Islam came to affirm. We need to have more bravery than women. If this wasn't the case, how could we do war? How could we defend our families? How could we protect women? How could we fulfill our function of responsibility, of protection? How can you protect someone who is more brave than you are, or you are the same level of bravery? In fact, bravery is so important and courage is so important that Aristotle, Hellenistic philosopher, he said that courage is the most important virtue because it guarantees all of the other virtues. In other words, if you don't have courage, you cannot have anything else, because you cannot protect, you cannot defend. Just like a military, and this is my analogy here, not Aristotle's, but just like a military protects one's security, or a police force protects one's security, and with that, you can then live your life and function, so too courage for a man protects the fortress of your family, the fortress of your own mind and self, and the community, the Muslim community at large. Therefore, the most important thing for a man to be able to do is to engender bravery in themselves. There is no doubt about that for me. In fact, very interestingly, there is new research that has been done in the University of Johannesburg in 2017, and I can, if you want the references, I can send you the references, but shows you that the braver you are, the happier you are, the more content in your life. And the reason why they made that connection is because they say if you're braver, if you're more courageous, you're more likely to be more resilient. which is a virtue in and of itself. Toughness is a standalone virtue. Resilience is toughness. We might even talk about that by itself, but the more tough you are, the more happy you are. Why? It makes sense, because life is difficult. Like Bruce Lee said, I don't pray to God that I have an easy life. I pray to God that God gives me the power to deal with a difficult one. You see, I don't pray to God to have an easy life. I pray to God that I have the strength to deal with a difficult one. So a resilient person who can deal with difficulty means that when life, which is a battleground and a testing ground and a difficult place, when it gets hard, you can deal with that. You can deal with that. And so the guarantor of all of that is courage. Because for resilience and toughness, you need to be pushed in a hard or a harsh or a difficult environment and still decide not to give up. Not giving up is part of courage. That is part of courage. So the first thing I say is, if there was going to be a crowning virtue, that what differentiates a man from a woman, I would put to you that that crowning virtue should be bravery, additional courage. Can courage be something which you build upon and something which you can develop? Yes, there is good evidence to show that you can develop your courage. Why? Because if you think about it, what is courage? Courage is not feeling fear, effectively. Courage is knowing what to do when you're in a state of fear. Just like the Sheikh was telling us yesterday, that, with anger, and it's the same thing. When you get angry, someone can provoke and antagonize you. You get angry. It's only natural. It's only natural. Someone says something about your prophet or yourself or your family, and you just stand there. That's not normal behavior. That means there's something wrong with you. And as a Shafi'i said, that means like you're a himar, من استغضب ولم يغضب فهو كالحمار, or something like that, right? So whoever's provoked and not antagonized but does not respond is like a donkey. Likewise, if you put anybody in a certain situation, they're going to feel fear. It's not about anger or fear. It's about how you respond or what you do in that situation. Mike Tyson, his coach, I forget his name, what's it? Castamaro, yeah? Castamaro, he said this, he said, look, the difference between a brave man and a coward is not that the brave man doesn't feel fear and that the coward does. He said the difference between a brave man and a coward is that the brave man, he acts despite the fear. Do you see? Both of them feel fear. Mike Tyson himself, he very famously said, every time I go to the ring, I feel fear. He doesn't look like someone who's experiencing fear when he's in there doing what he is doing, but he's feeling fear. So the point is you're gonna feel fear. And so the more you put yourself in scary positions and nevertheless perform despite that fear, the more you are effectively getting yourself more courageous, more brave. And this is very contextual. This is extremely contextual. For example, sometimes I go swimming with my son and with my daughters, and we see I saw this boy one time, like maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, and he was near the swimming pool, and I'll be honest with you guys, for a reason I've always had this fear of diving. I don't know why, especially because sometimes I dive and I'm tall, and if it's shallow, I hit my head I actually do hit. So I always feel like I'm going to hit my head on this thing. And anyway, I saw this little boy, and I was watching, my children do swimming and getting in there. And it's very interesting seeing children learn how to swim, because it's an experiment in human fortitude and, become a very good swimmer now. He can swim and go under the water and do this and do that. MashaAllah. But what I'm saying is, I saw this young boy, maybe he was about 5 years old, and he was by the swimming pool, and he was stretching and this and that, and then he jumped into the water and he dived in an amazing way. Like my son now, he can do these like fantastic dives in the water. I cannot do this, you know. I think to myself, what brings them to have the confidence and the courage effectively to do something like that? It's because you keep trying and you practice and whatever. So competence and confidence are two sides of the same coin. The more good you are at something, the less you fear doing it. But you can never know how good you are at something until you do it. You cannot learn how to swim on dry land. You need to get into the water, and life is just like that. You cannot learn to swim in life until you get into the water of life. So many of us have these ambitions, and we're afraid to get involved, but you cannot actually get better until you do it. And you have to accept you're going to fail a few times. So this is confidence. This is how confidence and competence and bravery connect. They connect because it's through experience, it's through how to control your emotions in those contexts. So for example, public speaking. Many people are surprised at the fact that, you know, I can go and speak to anybody at any time. It's not surprising because this is maybe the 1,000th time I'm doing this. Many people have never done this. So if they're doing it for the 3rd or 4th time, they might find it problematic because it's like, oh, I don't know, and all these kind of things. My first time, I was a little bit nervous. Second time, a little bit nervous, and the nervousness actually reduces. And apparently, according to studies, public speaking is one of those things that people fear the most. I was watching Anthony Joshua, you know, the boxer, you know him. You actually met him in person, didn't you? So I'm trying to bring everyone in here, like, you know, to this conversation. And there was actually a video of him. I don't even know how I got to watch this or something, but I saw it on YouTube, and he was like rock climbing. He was rock climbing, yes. And he was visibly nervous, as he was like visibly nervous. The heavyweight champion of the world, he doesn't mind 20,000 people. You know what I'm saying? Even though his performances of late, maybe the last one's okay, but anyway, Annie, whatever. I'm not going to make a comment because he could come to Islam, or I don't know if he's already become Muslim. But the point is he's not nervous when he goes into the bar. Oh, he might be, but many people wouldn't even put themselves in that position. But when he was rock climbing, he was very nervous because the context has changed. The moment the context has changed, and he's got the harness and everything, he starts to get nervous, and that's natural and normal. So this is a very important thing. There are some things I don't want to get brave in. And this is, like, for example, I was watching on Instagram, there was a guy, genuinely, who was jumping from roof to roof. I was sweating watching him, wallah. The guy was like, you know, this kind of, the jump around and all this kind of thing. Parkour. Have you seen this? And they jump from one building to the next building and that on. I was like, no, don't do it. I couldn't even watch it. Now that, in reality, it is a kind of bravery in that context. But for me, it's the kind of bravery that doesn't lead to anything beneficial. With all due respect, doesn't lead to anything beneficial. Like, if you don't do that, you're not a coward, if that makes sense. If someone decides, I'm not going to jump from this building to this one, like this guy, and says, look, and risk ending you're not a coward if you don't do this. So the question is, what is it that if you don't do that, you're a coward? Now, these are the most important things that every man must make sure that they don't do, because you can regret it for the rest of your life. And number one thing is protect yourself and your family. Worst is protecting your family. This is the worst thing. I cannot imagine, like, this is a nightmare. If you're walking with your wife, or you're walking with a woman of your family, or any woman, or you see some injustice taking place, and you cannot involve yourself in that, and you're seeing the injustice, the police in the United Kingdom or any other country cannot subcontract your masculinity to them. Imagine you call the police and 2 women come. That would be the most humiliating and emasculating thing. I'm not saying don't call the police. There's some situations where we all need to call the police. You know, someone's robbing a car or something, you know. I wouldn't necessarily get involved in that. I'm not getting paid for this, with all due respect. But if you see a Muslim woman getting, you know, her headscarf taken off and this and that, and you're not involving, that means to say that something's happening here where you haven't trained yourself in physical combat in the way that you need to the level where you can actually deal with this situation. That's what it means. Now, in the past, people didn't have a choice. People did not have a choice. You were going to war. There was a threat of war. It was over your head. The threat of war was over your head. Therefore, you had to learn how to use a knife and a sword. You had to use it. You needed to learn how to wrestle. Everyone was doing wrestling and these things. Why? Because it was important. And they were doing archery and target shooting and all this kind, depending on the age and history. Everyone was doing this stuff because if you don't know how to do this, you're going to die. They're going to take your women as slaves and children. That's what the stakes were like in the past. Now the stakes are not like that. So we've become lazy and we have become ineffectual and we have become inept. And as a result, we find more and more situations where we cannot, deal with the situation. And we talk about, like, for example, I would propose to you, one of the things that make the family life very bad is a lack of bravery by the man. Because if he's not a brave man, if the guy's not brave, he hasn't got that, he's not courageous, he's going to be afraid to speak to his wife in a certain manner. That's another context. You're afraid to speak to her, to take control, to take the reins, to do this, to do that. She's going to sniff it out because women are very good psychologically at psychoanalyzing a man. They'll look at you and say, oh, he's a bit afraid of me. He's a bit afraid of my consequences. Just like if you're in class, forget about women. You'll know if many good guys here in year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10, some of them even young. What I'm saying is that in class, the boys, they try and suss each other out. I used to remember this. You know what I mean? Especially in inner city London or in any other place in big cities in the UK. They want to see. They always talk. The biggest conversation, if you go to any school, between the boys in that year is who's the strongest in the year. And everyone has their opinions. Oh, can he have him? Can he have him? That used to be. Why? Because everyone wants to see what they can do and what they can manage and what they can leverage. So if you don't have the temperament to be able to deal with life in that way, people are going to recognize that. And the moment you're sniffed out as prey, effectively, you're prey now. The predators are going to come out. Because the predators are nothing but the bravest ones in our context. The bravest people are the predators. They're going to say, oh, okay, he's a coward. He doesn't want to fight me. That means I can leverage him in that manner, which means this has to be a priority for men in the age that we live. The only way to do that is to activate your sympathetic nervous system, to know when you're scared how to respond, to put yourself in a situation. I think it's actually a priority. It must be, I'm not going to make a hukum, but it must be like, on your list of priorities, top. I don't see how it could not be, based on what I've just said. It doesn't mean that you have to be a huge guy, a bodybuilder or, like Ajmal here. So you don't have to look like that. Not many people are going to have the opportunity to look like that, or even more. No, I'm joking. No, but it doesn't mean you're going to have to be huge or humongous or an MMA fighter or something. It doesn't. We're not saying any of that. We're just saying you have to be on it. You have to have the temperament because it's not about MMA and all this. It really and truly, if it comes down to it, someone's going to grab something and throw it. And, sometimes the MMA and all these kinds of things mean nothing on the streets anyway. It means nothing because one knife that's 6 inches, when it slices you from the top to the bottom of your neck like that, there's no move in MMA, in all of the disciplines they're in, that can protect you from that. One poke to your heart with a knife. One person has a knife. If they're 15-year-old, 14, 13, 12, and they have a knife in their hand, they're more dangerous than you are. That's the truth. So it's not about, okay, we have to be an MMA fighter. It's just about the fact that you have to be on combat. You have to be okay with it. And you have to be ready. Okay, if anything happens, it might not be a situation of punching and kicking. It might not be a situation of grappling. It might be a situation I have to grab something, and it might be a situation I take my family and put them here, and I take the bullet for them as they're running away. Do you know what I mean? It's not. I'm not saying that you have to be an MMA fighter or you have to be this. That's not. To be honest, most MMA fighters and things in the streets would not survive in many parts of the world because they get shot. Yani, what happens when you put guns into the equation? When you go to America and someone brings out a gun, okay, let's do like double leg takedown. Let's see double leg takedown versus double barrel shotgun. Which one is going to be a little bit more effective? You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is, you just need to have the mindset. The mindset. That's the most important thing. So the first thing that really distinguishes a man from other, categories, whether it's children or boys is bravery. Okay? So you have to become brave, and you have to. A second thing which I think came out in the discussion yesterday when the Sheikh was mentioning the ayat that relate to a man, which is لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله. This ayat in Surah An-Nur, very interesting. Because when the Sheikh was mentioning it, I was thinking, this is interesting. لا تلهيهم is something which a man is someone who's not distracted effectively. Tulhihim means distracted. They're not distracted by commerce and trade. Now, commerce and trade and dhikrillah. So basically, obviously, commerce and trade is allowed in Islam and is good and all these kinds of things. In fact, I was reading kitab I think it might have been Kitab al-Zuhd, which is attributed to Imam Ahmad, where he says, وَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةِ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Surah Al-Jumu'ah. It says, when the salat is finished, then go and seek provision in the earth. فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. And seek the provisions of God. I think I might be wrong, but double check. It was attributed that he said this could be an obligation. Like because it's an amr, if you think about it. When the prayer is finished, go out and seek provision. Meaning it's not an option for you to seek provision or not seek provision. You have to go and seek provision. So in terms of making money and protecting your family financially, it could be argued that it's actually a matter of obligation for men who are married and non-married to do that thing. That's how important it is. So we're not deprecating or abasing or diminishing from the idea that going and making money is an important thing. That's an important caveat. However, and dhikrillah means there's awlawiyat, or there's priorities, the most important of which is dhikrillah. Now, if you're in that time, in that sacred time, distracted, then that means to say that you're not disciplined. And this is the key word here. So we went from bravery to discipline. Because someone who's not distracted as well is discipline, focused or disciplined. Focused and disciplined. I mean, if you think about the word distraction, it's very interesting, because what is a distraction? A distraction is something which takes you away from the task. But if you have no task, then it's impossible logically for you to be distracted. Because what are you distracted from? Do you know what I mean? So our tasks are, for example, that we have worship of Allah, we have da'wah, we have whatever it may be. And then you have the distractions from that. So if someone is focused, they must be disciplined. Which leads us to something which in virtue ethics is referred to as temperance. Temperance. Now, temperance is effectively your ability to control your emotions. And that leads to, these hadith that we find, so many of them. First in the Quran, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. The ones who suppress their anger. This is the highest martaba of ihsan, which is excellence in Islam. The ones who suppress their anger. Number one. Number two is ليس الشديد بالسرعة ولكن الشديد من حمل نفسه أو أملك نفسه عند الغضب. Very famous hadith, or كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the one who is tough and mighty is not the one who can wrestle well, but is the one who is able to control his anger in a state of, or himself in a state of anger. Now, it's not to say that someone who wrestles well isn't strong. It's saying that in comparison, controlling your anger, a man controlling his anger is greater than an Olympic champion wrestler freestyle. Because if you can't control yourself, that has greater ramifications. Consider it. You can be a great wrestler, Olympic level freestyle wrestler, but you're less of a man than someone who's much smaller than you, much weaker than you. He would take down and single leg takedown or ankle pick or whatever. You can take him and finish him. But this guy when it comes to anger, he can control himself. And from the Islamic perspective, he's actually better than or more of a man, effectively, if ceteris paribus, everything else is saying the same, than the guy who's a freestyle wrestler. So the point is temperance, self-discipline, the ability to discipline yourself is one of those things, not be distracted, which are connected to the idea of masculinity in Islam. Because if you can't control yourself, then how are you going to control your family? You've been given certain ahkam that the woman has not been given. You can give talaq on her, she can't give talaq on you like that. The assumption is you can control yourself a little bit more. And in fact, there's good evidence to show that people with more self-control have happier lives. There's good evidence to show this. And once again, we can give you the references of these kinds of studies connected to self-discipline, you see, and happiness. The more in control of yourself and your emotions you are, the happier you're going to be, the more satisfied, the more life satisfaction you're going to have. The third thing is, you need to be generous. Because if you're not generous as a man, and you're always trying to keep money to yourself, manna'an lil khayr mu'tadin athim, you're manna', you are, and we've already mentioned the hadith, someone who prevents the good. You're a bakhil, effectively. وَمَن يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Allah says that whoever goes against their own sense of bukhl or shuh, then that person is successful. So those individuals who are stingy, their good can never permeate outside of themselves. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that, that the best people, أحبكم إلى الله أحبكم أحب الناس إلى الله أو أنفعكم للناس أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the most beloved people to Allah are the ones who are most beneficial, useful to the other people. And there's a whole hadith about that. If a man is beneficial or useful or helps his brother in a situation of need, is better than doing i'tikaf in his masjid for 1 month. So being useful. Look, consider the following. Your value, if everyone was a commodity here, everyone was like a mobile phone, like if I had to buy and sell everybody here, sorry to say, and including myself and everybody else, our value is determined really on 2 things. Yani, how much would you be worth? Based on 2 things. Number 1, obviously from the Islamic perspective, your iman. But number 2, your benefit to humankind. So if you're somebody who has limited benefit to humankind, your value as an individual becomes less. If you have more value to humankind, your value becomes more. A high value man, therefore, is someone who is highly beneficial to others. Doesn't mean someone who's got lots of money, as the red pillar and others say. It makes more sense to think this way. Even from an economic perspective, it makes more sense to say this. Because based on free market economics and demand and supply, it makes sense to say your market value, if you like, is based on your utility. Because the more useful you are, the more demand there will be for your service. And there's only one of you, so the supply is already low, so your price will be very high from a demand and supply perspective, economics. So it makes sense. This is why doctors get paid good money, and rightfully so in most economies, because that is a very beneficial service that they are putting forward for the people. And so on and so forth. Obviously, I'm saying the first point here, which was Iman, it trumps this second point. So, you can be very beneficial. You can be Mother Teresa, but if you don't have any Iman, it's all haba and manthura anyway. It's going to be dust, no problem. It's good work for you, but it's nothing going to. So the third point I'll make is generosity, and connected to that is beneficiality, or how usefulness, if you like. How useful you are as a human being to other people. As a man, you need to be useful to other people. So, do you remember the 3 things? Let's just make sure that everyone's on track. So, what did we say the first thing was?
Bravery.
Okay, courage, bravery, I think they're synonyms, so it's fine. What else did we say?
First, generosity.
Yes, generosity. What else did we say?
Yes, I agree.
Discipline, the word that they use is temperance, okay? Yes, okay. What else? That's where we are now, right? And we connected it to something else, which is what?
Dushun.
beneficial.
Yeah, being beneficial and useful. Yeah, okay. Now, the next thing I will mention to you is softness and gentleness and being compassionate. Compassion. Remember, the Prophet Muhammad is the greatest man of all time and the greatest human being of all time. And he has been referred to as Rahmatan lil Alameen. So the fact that sometimes we confuse the fact that we say that, okay, well, compassion, this belongs to the feminine. Femininity has never had a monopoly on compassion. It's never been the case. There's no evidence that the feminine has a monopoly on compassion. Fine, it's true. Mothers, I agree, exhibit a high level of compassion, maybe some of the highest levels we've seen as species on this planet. How mothers tend to their children. How a mother and a child, that's very, very high level compassion. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, for example, who was a man, okay, his level of compassion for the ummah was greater than all of the mothers in humanity who have ever graced the earth, and all their children, yes, is greater than the combined aggregate of all that. And he was one man. Because he was rahmatan lil alameen, for all of the people. And you might think this is an exaggeration. It's not an exaggeration. Compassion is, if you're not compassionate and you are a man, then you are going to be potentially tyrannical. You can be a bad guy. Effectively, you can have all these other traits. Yani, all these other traits that we said that you can have. You can have temperance or discipline and generosity and this and that. But then you can be not compassionate. And then that one thing, that lack of ingredient, can make you a bad guy. You're a man, I agree, but you're a bad man. What makes you a good man is compassion, is rahmah itself. And so compassion actually cannot exist if there is no strength. Let me explain why. If I was in a jail cell and someone came and knocked on the door, my warden, jail warden or something, and he said, listen, come here, you're going to have your weekly punishments. I don't know, whatever it is, yeah. You're going to write lines, or if it's America, you're going to pick up some rocks from the road, or whatever they get them to do, right? And I'm so angry with this guy, and I'm saying I'm the prisoner, and I say to him, listen, I'm so angry right now, I'm going to be compassionate with you. I'm going to be merciful to you. Does that make sense in this context? It doesn't make sense, because you cannot be merciful to someone you don't have control over. That's a principle. Think about it. It's not actually mercy here. If I was on top of something, there's the MMA fighter, say for example, someone attacks him, some Welsh guy outside. I don't know why I said, well, we're in Wales, by the way. But anyway, Yanni, just for the camera. If someone attacks him, some Welsh guy, and then he now engages in MMA, and he gets into the mount position, okay, you know about that. And then you get on top of him, and then he's going to start the ground and pound. And then he looks at him, and the guy starts moving his face, and you know he's defenseless at this point. He says, listen, out of mercy, I'm not going to continue. And he gets off him. That's mercy, right? But it's only mercy because he's dominating him. So a prerequisite for mercy is power. You cannot have mercy without power. How can you have mercy without? It's not mercy there, then. You can call it whatever you like. You can call it expedience. You can call it pragmatism. You can call it cooperation, but you cannot call it mercy. For mercy to happen, you have to have strength and power. But mercy is a part of the package of what it means to be a man. Gentleness and mercy, compassion and kindness. This is extremely important, in fact, and a missing ingredient in some of the presentations that we see online in the so-called manosphere. We don't see this. This is completely lost from the equation. We don't see this. And only recently we're starting to see people come and do charities and stuff like that, because they realize that this is a very important ingredient. We cannot neglect it, because then you'll be seen as a bad man. Then other people can come out and say, well, this guy's a bad guy. This guy's a manipulator. This guy's a narcissist. Effectively, that's what you're going to be. And nowadays, if you're in a relationship and the woman a lot of women, I should say, don't like you, or they don't like the fact that you're domineering, They're going to smear you and say, oh, look, he's a narcissist. But if you're compassionate and generous, then you stop that from being able to be said. Because you've always shown compassion. And you've always controlled your anger. And you've never harmed anybody. See? So compassion is extremely important thing, which also is what it means to be a man. And connected to this concept is forgiveness. You know, it takes courage to be forgiving. أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. As the Quran states, do you not want Allah to forgive you? There is so much in the Quran about being forgiving. About forgiveness. فَعْفُوا وَاصْفَحُوا. يعني, فَعْفُوا, we forgive or pardon them. وَاصْفَحُوا literally means to turn the page over. من صفحة. Turn the page over with the person. So obviously it's different. Pardoning and forgiveness are effectively a little bit different here. But you should do that. You should exercise forgiveness. It takes bravery and it takes courage to forgive someone who has wronged you. Now, obviously, if you do it in a context where the person is not going to benefit from that, then that's not what that is. That's weakness, in fact. As some of the famous Arab proverb, you know, لا تكن صلبا فتكسر ولا تكن لينا فتعصر. You know, very interesting. I thought it was connected to Ali ibn Abi Talib. It's not. But it means this: do not be so rigid that you'll be broken, like a stick. You know, if you get something rigid, it's so easy to break. But do not be so malleable that you can be bent around all the time, or squeezed. You know, you can be squeezed. So you need to have a degree of malleability, but it can't be too malleable. So you need to know when to be forgiving, and you need to know when to be pardoning, and you need to know when to be compassionate. And this whole thing here, what I'm talking about, it's called what? You need to know when to do something. Wisdom. It's wisdom, which is another of the virtues that a man must have. You see, how many have we got now? Someone say them to me, please. You got the notes. So let me ask you. Yeah. Yes. Courage. Yeah. Oh, that's one thing. Yeah.
Be disciplined.
Be disciplined. Yeah.
How useful are you to people?
Yeah.
Softness.
And we connected with this with generosity as well, right? Generosity and utility. You can actually put those as two separate categories, but it's up to you. Yeah.
Utility.
Yeah. Fine.
One category is softness, gentle.
Yeah. That's all one thing, right? Compassion. Let's just call it compassion. Yeah.
That's what you're.
And what did you say? We said something here now. Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Yeah, forgiveness, which is different, a little bit different. Because forgiveness, someone has to do something bad to you first. You know, someone has to do something that is worthy of forgiving. And then we said wisdom is when to do any of those things and all those things.
Thanks.
And the last one I'm going to mention to you guys, really, if you're these things, then you're a great man. Not just any man, but you're a great man. If you are muttasif, these things are attributed to you, then you are actually you're a great man if you are. The last one is equitable or just, if you like. A just man is a good man. Justice is, and this, once again, it requires bravery. Because وَإِذَا قُلْتُمْ, as the Quran says, وَإِذَا قُلْتُمْ فَأَعْدِلُوا وَإِنْ كَانَ ذَا قُرْبَى. If you're going to speak the truth, do so even if it is somebody who is close to you. You have to speak the truth. Connected to this, by the way, is always keeping your word. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَوْفُوا بِالْعُقُودِ. That, O you who believe, keep your contracts. أَوْفُوا بِالْعُقُودِ. So much so, the uqud thing, keep your contracts. If you have an agreement with someone, Muslimun ashurutihim, Muslims are upon their conditions, hadith. Muslims are upon their conditions. That, there's an ayah in the Quran that I was thinking about it, which is that وَإِن نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانِهِمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ عَهْدِهِمْ فَقَاتِلُوا أَئِمَّةَ الْكُفْرِ. Very interesting. This is a very interesting Surah At-Tawbah. وَإِن نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ عَهْدِهِمْ فَقَاتِلُوا أَئِمَّةَ الْكُفْرِ. Says, this is about this believers. If they go against their contracts, they go against their oaths after the agreement, then fight the leaders of the disbelievers, the heads of them. أئمة الكفر. But what's interesting about this is that saying من بعد عهدهم, which means that there is scope for you to do contracts with people who are non-believers. And there are many verses in the Quran like that, which allow that. Which means that if you're going to do contracts with non-believers who have the potential to attack you as Muslim people, then imagine as believers how important the contract should be. Yani if one Muslim country is making an agreement with a non-Muslim country, and that must be respected, so much so that Allah is saying, وَإِن نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانِهِمْ. So He's not saying you can just do that, you can go fight the أئمة الكفر. He's saying that if they do this, اشتراط, if you do this, then do this, then that means to say that the idea of contracts and agreements and sticking to your word as a man in Islam is extremely important. And this is something which is obviously universal. I mean, most of these things, if not all of them, are universal. But I'm saying that if you want to be a true man, these are the things which you need to exhibit a lot of, especially the first characteristic, which is that of bravery. And of course, there are specified rulings. I mean, we're not going to go into discussion about rulings and distinctions, because there are rulings and distinctions that Allah has for a man that He doesn't have for a woman. For example, the idea of a dayuth. Now, you can have a dayuth woman, a cuckold, or I don't know what they, cuckoldry. This individual who lets his wife basically have intercourse with other men. Or anything that really leads to that or is close to that, you see. But there are hadiths which indicate that the punishment for a man obviously is much higher than the punishment for a woman. It's more of a masculine trait, that a man has to have ghira, a protective jealousy. It doesn't mean a woman doesn't have it. It just means that we expect it more. But then if you think about the things in the Sharia which we expect more from a man than it is from a woman, then they're always related to protection. And they always prerequisite bravery. Do you see the point? There's a trend here with what we're saying. Yeah. Like this ayah in Surah Muhammad is very interesting ayah, and I was thinking about it, which is وَإِذَا نُزِّلَتْ آيَةٌ مُحْكَمَةٌ وَذُكِرَ فِيهَا الْقِتَالُ رَأَيْتَ الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ ينظرون إليك نظر المغشي عليه من الموت فأولى لهم. This is very interesting ayah, because bravery is so important, and we're circling back to the first one here, that in the context of war, Allah is telling the men that when some of them, when an ayah, muhkama, a decisive ayah comes down, and in it fighting is mentioned, you see the ones whose heart is a disease. They look at you, O Muhammad ﷺ, as if they are going to die, meaning they're so worried and fearful and scared. Allah is humiliating their cowardice. He's identifying the cowardice, and He's humiliating them in the Quran because of it. They look at you like, فَأَوْلَى لَهُمْ. He's saying that it's better for them. Awla means it's prioritized for them that they go and fight. They should go and fight. Meaning, and that's why ta'atun wa qawlun ma'ruf is the next ayah, which actually ta'ah, this could go and do, obey. The point I'm making is this, is that you'll find that what it means to be a man, yes, a lot of the things are universal. However, the things that we need to focus on the most, certainly, are those aspects of bravery. And if really there was one attribute that I was going to take from all of the attributes that I mentioned, which really distinguish a man from a woman in Islam, by the looks of it, if you do istiqra and tatabbu' and looking at it, is this one virtue of bravery, because it connects to protection and qawwama and all of the things. And so with that, I will open up to questions and answers. Jazakumullah khairan.
Where you mentioned that the man should stick to his words and abide by contract. Within this country, there's social contracts. Would that still apply under that, what you mentioned? And you have to stick to it. a social contract,
You're talking about like the political social contracts.
generally speaking.
Give me an example.
And I was just speaking about on the dead.
Do you mean
Okay. For example, going to a restaurant, there's a service charge which should have to be taken off. However, they said it's mandatory.
Yeah. So these are all fiqhi, very deep fiqhi questions.
Well, it says it has to be clear.
Yeah. So remember that question, put it, and then you can ask the sheikh, and we'll think about, because these are all like quite jurisprudential in nature. So I don't know.
there's going to be a panel? And
Yes.
There's going to be an open Q&A session for 2 hours after Maghrib, inshallah.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Yes.
See, you know, when you were talking about when you could get into a situation where you have to defend your family and everyone feels this fear. What would you advise someone in that situation where they're thinking, what do I do? And they've got this fear in them. You know, when they've got that fear and they're in that situation where they don't know what to do, what would you advise people with that kind of person?
Honestly, like, you know, it's one of those things where you need to train yourself before that happens. Do you know what I mean? Like, and the closest simulation that we have here in the UK is, in fact, martial arts. That's the closest simulation. I don't know of any other simulation. However, I don't see why not do other things which are high adrenaline activities, how that could affect in a positive way. I'm not saying go bungee jumping or whatever, but I think someone who does bungee jumping, I'm not saying they would probably be better equipped to deal with it, because they've felt what it means to have a heightened sense of fear, and they know how to manage themselves in that context. Because look, biologists say the following, okay? You've got something called the autonomic nervous system, the ANC. This is, everybody has this. And then it's divided into two. It's divided into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, well, let's start with the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for what they call rest and digest. So when you eat food right now, where there's no heightened sense of, there's no threat or something. So your body digests food, you know what I mean? If you're eating breakfast, whatever, it's digesting food. It's relaxing, it's doing whatever it's doing, yeah? The sympathetic nervous system is exactly the opposite. So your eyes dilate, your palms get sweaty, adrenaline is effectively released into your blood, into your body, it's secreted, and you have this nervous reaction. And by the way, interestingly, you'll find that when that happens, your digestive system in fact is switched off completely. Yeah, I mean, you're not thinking about going to the toilet or anything like that. Your pupils are dilated. You're on they call it fight or flight. So you've got fight or flight, and you've got rest and digest. Now, how do we ensure you don't do the flight? Just and do the fight. Sometimes doing the flight is the right thing to do. If someone comes to you with a big knife in the middle of the streets and you're by yourself, you know, unless you consider, honestly, that they're probably faster than you, then in which case it might be better to actually go for it. Like if for example, if you're very, very obese, and the guy is like half your weight, and if you run, he's going to stab you in the back. You know, it might, for most of us, it's better to run away in this situation. It's actually a better idea. But we're not talking about those specified situations. The fact that you're calculating the whole thing is what you want to be able to do. Think about it rationally. The only way to do that is to calm your nerves. And the only way to do that is to put yourself in these situations and literally do self-talk, calm yourself down. Because when you do that and you put yourself in this situation and calm yourself down over and over again, then it becomes less novel. The more something becomes less novel, it bluntens your receptors, and then you are able to deal with it in a less excited format. So I think that the way I would advise it is you have to put yourself in these situations. And frankly, like we're living in an age of technology. Why not go online? There's so many YouTube pages now that deal with like defense and stuff, like not just in the context of someone fighting you, but If someone comes in with a gun, someone comes in with a knife, what to do? And there's specialists, and you see these discussions taking place, because at least if you see it on there, it's not much of a surprise for you. The point is, you want to remove as much as possible the element of surprise. The art of war, in the art of war, you want to be surprising to your opponent, and you want to remove the surprise from yourself. That's effectively all it is.
Next question. Tell
How to build more bravery?
I thought So let me just, in terms of bravery, I think that the best thing to remember here is that there's general bravery and there's context-specific bravery, yeah? So how to build more bravery in the context of doing what? So for example, if you were to ask me, how do you build more bravery in the context of parkour? I say you have to jump on some buildings. That's effectively how you do it. You have to start with the small buildings. I'm not a coach, but this is logical analysis, right? I would never want any Muslim to do this ridiculous waste of time sport. It doesn't give you a medal. It doesn't give you honor. It doesn't give you anything. I mean, I literally saw this guy and he went on a lamppost. He jumped on, hugged the lamppost, fell on the floor and this and that. And some of them fall. Actually, I was so shocked. Sorry, side note. Do you know, because I was investigating bravery, yeah? Do you know there's guys that go up the mountain without a harness?
Yeah.
Have you ever?
Sure.
So I was saying that, I saw these guys that they call it free climbing, I think, yeah? When they go up these big mountains and they're going up the mountain, but without harnesses. There was one guy who went up the mountain, he literally 1 meter away, I forget his name, right? 1 meter away from the peak of the mountain. And he fell, akhi. He fell and he broke, he was alive. Like his spinal cord was finished. He was finished. I mean, he was in the hospital for a year or something. And they repaired his spinal cord, his leg broken, unbelievable, yeah? Unbelievable. And guess what he done? When he recovered, he went and done it again. He got it the second time. But akhi, I'm thinking to myself, why on earth would you climb a mountain without a harness? But, okay, it's wrong behavior. I don't endorse this in the least. I think this is, hurma here. I actually think this is like killing yourself. The Quran says, do not cause your own hands because of your destruction. However, as a psychological analysis, let's think about how much bravery this required. How did he build himself up to be able to climb a mountain? You're looking down, there's no rope on you, bro. And you're looking down and you're 100 meters, one wrong move, you're falling down. You're dying. You know what I mean? How did he build himself up to that level? He must have started with a little wall. That's where he started. He slayed the small dragon. Okay? He started with a small wall of 5 meters. And then he took the harness off and he said, if I fall, I fall. And then he done 10 and then he done 15. He kept slaying dragons. And then he got to a level where he said, you know what? Let me go for this. And he pushed himself that day. And you know what I mean? He went for it. He went for the mountain. I don't know how he went for the mountain. Maybe he had nothing to live for, with all due respect. I don't know what it is in his mind that got him to that place. But maybe for him, it became the goal in life. This is it. I want to do this thing. And so therefore, when he prioritized the matter in his mind, it was not going to be a situation that's like, I'm going to give up on this. So it's having it in your mind and then building yourself up. And it's context specific. Bravery is context specific. It's very important to know this point. Bravery is context specific. I could never, ever do it. Just even thinking about it is making me worried. Let alone doing it, or even watching it is horrifying. I don't like to see this stuff. Heights and this and that and guy on the top of the buildings. I hate it. If I saw him, I think I would slap him. Say, listen, this is wrong behavior. This is bad behavior. Say, stop it. This is wrong behavior. Stop. I said, dude, stop it. You know what I mean? What was that all about? What was that? You know what I mean, why did you do that? He'd be coming back thinking that I should slap him. So it's context specific. That's why the people talk about David Goggins, and they use him as like I'm sure if, you've seen him, David Goggins, right? He's a motivational speaker. He's always running and doing a video. You've seen him. Very famous. And people say he's the toughest man on the planet. And look, I don't take away from his credentials or his abilities or anything like that. But for me, I started looking and seeing trends. And what were the trends? He's got the pull-up challenge. He does a lot of running. There's a lot of swimming. Okay, all that stuff, right? So I've never seen him fight before. Now, with all due respect, I'm not saying that this means he's a coward. What I'm saying is that if we want to see if David Goggins is the toughest man on the planet, he has to be tested in so many different environments. Now, him taking himself out of the comfort zone means he has to stop doing push-ups and start doing fighting or something like that. Do you know what I'm saying? For him, his comfort zone is no longer running. We know you're a great runner, okay? Do you know what I mean? You have to try something new if you want to be the toughest man on the planet. Do you know what I mean? For him, the comfort zone is running. For us, it's not running. He knows that. He knows that us is running and he's being filmed and he's saying, get out of bed and whatever. The equivalent of my blanket under my bed is you running in the desert. So if you want the equivalent of me running in the desert, you have to go and do something completely different now. That's his next level. Now, do you see what I'm trying to say? Everyone has fears, okay? And there is something which will trouble anybody. And so it's putting yourself out of your comfort zone as much as possible into different contexts. And you have to decide which one are the most important ones. For us, it's protection. So I don't mind living and dying and going and being dead and not knowing how to climb mountains without a harness or jumping from building to building. If someone tries to defame me for that, say, listen, you don't know how to jump buildings. Say, listen, I'm actually ashamed of you that you know how to jump the buildings like that. Like, I give you no credit. Do you know what I mean? I am not excited about jumping building to building. But I do still realize that this is a kind of bravery that I don't have.
What about the spiritual side? So you can prepare yourself physically. But what about like the iman, when you embody the bravery within you? For example, knowing if you die shaheed, if you're protecting the family. So there's...
Yeah, I think you said it right. And subhanAllah, like that's perfectly said. If you have the idea of tawakkul itself, like reliance on Allah, that by itself, it engenders a kind of bravery that nothing else can. Because if you think about the Sahaba, how they proliferated, it's good that you brought that up actually, how they proliferated and became like the Islamic civilization, the way it is, right? Yani, how could they do that? How could they face an army so much bigger than their own? It's like almost certain death. They must have had something, it was on a different level, like, do you know what I'm trying to say? It's on a different level, and that is tawakkul Allah. And actually, هل تربصون بنا إلا إحدى الحسنيين. That you have to have an idea that both of these outcomes are okay for me. John Jones, who's MMA, they say he's the greatest of all time in MMA. I saw an interview with him one time, and he was talking about how he prepared himself for some of the fights, and he has. And something he said, which is very interesting and links into what I'm saying here, is that he said, before I fight somebody, I think about the worst thing that could potentially happen to me, and I try and make myself okay with that. So he said, before I fought Rampage Jackson, I thought about him knocking me out or something, and I was okay with that. I became okay with that. Now the point is usually when we're inhibited to do something as people, it's because we fear the consequences. So what you can do is you can look at what are the consequences. You have your own time where you actually write down what are the consequences of me doing this action, whatever action it may be business, it may be this, maybe that. There's a consequence, or there are a range of consequences. You line them up, and then you think, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then you start desensitizing yourself to the worst case scenario. When you have tawakkul ala Allah, and you believe in the qadr, you realize everything is good for you anyway. So the combination of tawakkul, having reliance on Allah, and qadr, which you believe that everything is good for me, even if on the outward it would look like a bad outcome, if you have those two things, it puts the entire thing on steroids for you. That's why, really and truly, Muslim people in the Islamic civilization, if we're really honest, have shown the most in the past, not in the present, and not in the last 200 years, but in the past have shown the most bravery I think human beings have ever seen. If you consider like the milestone historical moments, the Mongol invasions and the Battle of Hattin and obviously before that, the Sahaba, and going to Spain Fatah of Andalusia and all of these things. It took too much bravery to do this kind of thing. That was if that ingredient was gone, like if all the ingredients that we said, that one was gone, they would not be there. Yeah, basically, if there was no bravery, we wouldn't be here today together, because our countries would not be opened up by people who had it. Tawakkul, belief in the qadr, which does ta'deed, it strengthens your idea of bravery, shaja'a. And so, yes, to answer your question, you have to desensitize yourself to the notions. And I really like your interjection, because in terms of coming in with the spiritual aspect of tawakkul and qadr, those two things in particular, you really believe in anything is good for me, whatever, Allah has decided. And that's why husnayain, it's basically two good things. Either you'll be martyred, is good for me, or I get victory. So what's the problem? What do I lose? I either come out of this battle being battle hardened or a martyr on the one hand, or I will be shaheed on the other, which is fantastic. For me, it's a win-win situation. So that's how you, hopefully it answers. Yes, sir.
Yes, there's a fine line, labelizing people called men with lusts. That's where we are being attacked by the planet and just scared, especially again. But how psychologically we are being more soft just because we are avoiding to be labelized as narcissists.
Yeah.
So, overlapping. So, how Tamarin command her aspects, he reached him vague, right? All these aspects you mentioned, they attack the innocent to it. So, let's say an old girl just read about narcissism. She's then reading that bit. So, what I'm doing is not that, we're going to be labeled by the community around young people, younger than us, probably the new generation, or, such as being, widespread nowadays in social media. So everyone is getting into psychology. Everyone is trying to, having this explained by certain things. And, like that, as, we ended up all these psychological aspects of the human being that we discovered everything. So, in terms of men, being softened because of these fine lines, or where do we draw these lines and know that we are not narcissists, but, we are being legalized to put us off, or to put, at least, downgrade us.
So the way that's a good point. I mean, nowadays we have new age labeling, right? Everyone's become a psychoanalyst, and everyone knows how to label someone else as a narcissist or anything like that. And now you have whole YouTube channels that deal with narcissists and how to recognize a narcissist. If you go around how to recognize a narcissist, and then you look in the comment section, yeah, that's my boyfriend, yeah, that's my wife, that's my husband, and so on and so forth. Now the thing is this: let's take a look at it, because in the DSM, which is the psychological manual, okay, which is used by psychologists, there's something called narcissistic personality disorder, which is actually, they've labeled it as a disorder. Now, really and truly, personality disorders, number one, are the most difficult thing for a psychoanalyst highly trained to identify, let alone a layperson, because it's not, you don't exhibit normal symptoms here. You have to look at someone's personality. You have to spend hours and time with them and so on. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in Islam, there is no concept of narcissism like this. Like, for example, if you've got all these conditions that are met, okay, then you are now labeled with a new label which requires you to be dealt with in a certain manner. We have tabdi', we have tafsiq, we have takfir. You see, these are the labels in Islam. You're a kafir, or you're a fasiq, you're an evildoer, you're a mubtada', which many of us have been labeled, no problem, which is that you're an innovator, religious innovator. These are classically the labels that we've had. What is the closest thing to narcissism in Islam is actually kibr. So in Islam, you have two things, ujb and kibr. We have amrad al-qalb. We've already kind of, the spiritual doctors and scholars have already spoken about these issues. So you have things like kibr, and you have things like ujb. And these things are very well defined for us as Muslim people. Okay, so what is kibr? Kibr is arrogance. and it is بطر الحق وغمط الناس. Effectively, two characteristics, which you are rejecting the truth and belittling the people, debasing the people. That is, if you're doing those two things, someone can say you're acting in an outrageous way. You've belittled me and you've deprecated me. Then this is molten tuhma from an Islamic perspective, because you're attacking people and you're rejecting the truth. For us, we look at that and that's important to us, because the Prophet Muhammad himself defined it like that. Now we have these people who have just done their degrees or want to have, following on YouTube, and say, look, these are the conditions of a covert narcissist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's something called covert narcissism, and there's something called overt narcissism, and there's a spectrum in between, and these are the things that they will do. And so manipulate. It was, do you know what I mean? So what I mean, so what I mean is that, and then the person becomes their own psychologist and say, okay, well, actually, I've seen this, which means now I have to deal with you with ihtiyat, which means now and they'll start making ahkam. You're causing me darar in Islam, and you're doing this and doing that, and therefore I have to deal with you in this way and that way. What I'm saying is, really and truly, I'm not saying that the idea of narcissism is a meaningless idea. There's certainly some of those things which are mentioned in those manuals and those books about narcissism, which I've read many about, are legitimate. Like, for example, there's a book by Dr. Malkin called The Narcissism Test. I read the book, and I like the way he defines it. I like the way he tests it. He's got a very, if you like, mature approach to the matter. Dr. Malkin, the book is called The Narcissism Test, basically says, he defines narcissism as a spectrum of self-importance, okay? And he says that, look, you've got two sides of the spectrum. On the one hand, you have people who are extremely self-absorbed and think only about themselves. That's a kind of personality behavior. And he calls the other side egoists, people who care about other people. They're too altruistic, and they call them self-deniers. They engage in self-denial, okay? And his idea was, look, it's like anything else. There's tarafin wa wasat. There's basically two sides of the extreme and a middle ground. And he's saying that the more closer you are to the middle ground, the happier your life will be, and the more healthy you are as a human being. Very mature approach to the topic. Do you know what I'm saying? And he's saying that everyone's on a spectrum somewhere. So when I done the test, I was like a 7 out of 10. I done the test instead. I was like 7 out of 10, so more on the narcissistic side. But when my wife done it, she was like a 2 out of 10. So you know what I'm saying? So she was more on the egoistic side. So we realized there's good to be learned from both of our sides. And if it's not going to be weaponized by the partner or attacking or this and that, then that's fine. But now if it becomes a matter of the part, you're not a narcissiji. Even in Arabic now, they've got these massive things in Arabic language. Hada narcissiji. This guy's a narcissist and so on. And they throw the label about as if they're doctors and they're qualified and this and that. They're none of the above. And by the way, this idea of narcissism is so subjective that you don't even know where to start and where to end. The point is that we don't deny that there are traits which are referred to as narcissism, but to treat someone differently because you conceive them that way is where we draw the red line. We have arrogance in the religion, something called arrogance, the concept of arrogance. We have something called ujub, and the difference between them is the object. Whereas ujub, you don't need a subject and an object. Yeah, in other words, you can be muta'ajjib bi nafsik. You can look at the mirror and be very self-amazed. Whereas kibr, you need someone to do it to. You need someone to put down. So you need an object of arrogance. And quite frankly, this narcissism thing is a new concept which has been embellished. And the reason why there's so many books and stuff about it is because people realize this proximity and connection to relationship trauma. And so they are preying on the vulnerabilities of certain people that need to blame other people, you see, and use it as ammunition in relationship contexts. And I think that's why it's become very popular recently.
Psychologically, do you think it's softening us without us knowing?
Yeah, because if you're scared to be labeled in that way, okay, so now I'm not going to do this. You have to, وَلَا تَخَافُونَ لَوْمَةَ لَائِمٍ.
If you're aware about
Yeah, because a man is afraid of his reputation being damaged. Okay, so he doesn't want his wife or his whatever, or even other female members of the family to go and say, well, he's a narcissist. He's actually dealing with me, and he's exhibiting all these narcissistic traits. Effectively, her doing that, or the opposite, or a man going and say, my wife is a narcissist. She's a covert narcissist or whatever. She's a manipulator or whatever. This is weak behavior. Deal with your own problems at home. Stop trying to use ammunition against your partner like this. Try and look at the person as humanize them. Because this is effectively, I think, what's going on. Why it's become so popular, the topic of narcissism, is because people use these quotations from, a lot of these are pop psychologists, not even psychologists, as a means of or ammunition against their partners in relationships. So then, that's what I personally believe. But in Islamic context, this means nothing. This means absolutely nothing. In terms of, you cannot build a hukum on your perceived notion of this person is narcissistic. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Any other questions?